All right, as I mentioned earlier, getting a little bit of feedback. We have Jeff Fabiano is going to come up and share. I'm going to share a little bit, and he can fill in the gaps. Jeff is married to Katie, delightful family here at Rooftop. They've got two boys, Joshua and Samuel. Is that the right order? Samuel and Joshua. And they've been attending Rooftop for 3, going on 4 years now. And they're involved in the Cook small group. And then Jeff has done ministry, especially with at-risk youth, for a number of years, as well as has a degree in counseling from a local seminary as well. So we are excited to have Jeff with us. You guys can give a big, warm Rooftop welcome to Jeff Fabiano.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to lower this. I'm not tall. Like he said, my name is Jeff Fabiano, and Fabiano is a fun name. I like that that's my name. I didn't always like it. It's been kind of mangled over the years. Some people add letters. I was called Fabiano this week. I get letters taken out. Over the years, I had a coach when I was in, I think, first grade. He refused to even learn it. He just called me Fabioni. He didn't care. He said, "Hey, Fabioni, come over here." And so I've learned to adapt to my surroundings pretty well. In recent years, I've gotten called Fabio a lot, which is obvious with my long flowing hair and my wonderful physique. Or Fobs, it's just easier to say that. So a lot of people have resorted to that. But like Jeremy said, I work with at-risk youth. I've been doing that for about 3 years now. I work for an organization called Episcopal City Mission. And I work as a chaplain in the juvenile detention center. And so what I try and do there, and on good days, I think I fulfill the mission of our organization, which is to provide hope and healing for kids who are locked up, who come from really bad situations. And then some days I just come home and it hurts and it's painful, and because I just hear stories from kids who are really come from bad situations. One other thing that you need to know about me is that I grew up in Chicago. For 22 years, that was where I lived. And so this morning, I want to talk to you about how God can give hope to the brokenhearted. I can assure you that being from Chicago, I can relate to being brokenhearted. Of course, that means I am a Cubs fan. So you can pray for me. At a very young age, I was indoctrinated into all things Cubs. I brought a picture right there, me and my cousin Chris, although Jeremy thought that I photoshopped Isaac Charney in there on the right there, but that's me and my cousin sitting through what I'm sure was another heartbreaking loss. Sometimes the Cubs actually have done things that have been good. 2003, I drove 8 hours to Atlanta to the Game 5 of the National League Division Series because I really wasn't sure if the Cubs would ever be in a Game 5 again in my lifetime. So I had to go. And they won. The first playoff series they'd won in 95 years. Yeah, 95 years. And I watched on TV a few weeks later hoping that they would make it to the World Series. And they should have. They had 5 outs. They were up 3 runs in the 8th inning. And then the Bartman game happened. And I had forgotten about that and forgotten that they'd given up 8 runs in that 8th inning. And thanks to Facebook, I was reminded again of how depressing it is to be a Cubs fan. And so my heart's been broken a lot. And I titled the message this morning, Hope for the Brokenhearted. So I probably should stop talking about the Cubs because that seems pretty hopeless. What I really want to talk to you about this morning, though, is Jesus' mission. The Bible gives us a number of stories that focus on his mission, on what he wanted to do with his life. I want to focus on one of those stories found in Luke chapter 5 this morning, starting in verse 12. So if you have a Bible, you can look there. Otherwise, it'll be on the screen above me. And it says this in Luke chapter 5, verses 12 through 16. While Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell face to the ground and begged him, "Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I'm willing," he said, "be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. Then Jesus ordered him, "Don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing, as a testimony to them." Yet the news about him spread all the more, so the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to the lonely places and prayed. So what do we have going on here in this story? It starts out and it tells us that Jesus was in a town. It doesn't tell us what the name of the town was. It doesn't tell us where he was exactly. It could be any town. And I think that Luke describes it this way for us so that we can relate to the story, because it could be your town. He's pointing to the fact that it could be anywhere where there's people who are hurting or broken or oppressed. In fact, just a few verses earlier in Luke chapter 4, Jesus quotes from the book of Isaiah 61, verses 1 and 2. It says, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners." See, he comes to those of us who are brokenhearted, those of us who are captive to pain and hurt and our sin and our diseases. And he tells us in this story in Luke chapter 5 about one of those brokenhearted people. He says it's a man with leprosy. And in Jesus' day, leprosy was the worst disease you could have. You don't want to have leprosy. It was a skin disease where lesions would appear on your body, in your arms, your legs, your face. Many of these lesions would produce damage to the sensory nerves, which makes the skin numb in these areas. As the disease progressed, tissues would be destroyed, and the lack of pain sensation would lead to traumatic injuries to the hands and feet. So I looked online to try and find a picture, and it was just too grotesque, actually, to show any of the real people with leprosy I had. So I found a Hollywood version. This is one of the characters from Braveheart who Hollywood doctored up, and so it was more tolerable, I thought. But you can still see it was bad, the physical damage that's done to your body if you were infected with leprosy, and there was no cure. Not only did it cause physical problems, but if you had leprosy, you were pretty much cut off from society. Leviticus 13:45 and 46 says, "Anyone with such a defiling disease must wear torn clothes, let their hair be unkempt, cover the lower part of their face, and cry out, 'Unclean, unclean.' As long as they have the disease, they remain unclean. They must live alone. They must live outside the camp." See, the lepers had to live outside the city. If they came close to you, they had to shout, "Unclean." They couldn't be around other people. They had to dress in raggedy clothes. They had to cover their face so they wouldn't get you sick. And they shouted out their pain, "I'm unclean. Don't come near me." That was for two reasons. One was so other people wouldn't catch the disease, but the other was for religious reasons. If you were to come in contact with a leper, you would not be allowed, you would be considered ceremonially, I hate that word, ceremonially unclean. And you're not allowed into the worship service. You couldn't go to church. You couldn't be in the presence of other people who wanted to worship God. So imagine that's your life. You live on the outskirts of town. You don't have any friends. You don't have any contact with other people. Nobody's allowed to touch you. Psychologists say that being touched by others is essential to the health and well-being of humans' emotional, physical, and mental development. So not only does this guy have to deal with the physical discomfort of this disease, but he's got to deal with the emotional and the spiritual pain as well. So put yourself in his shoes. I learned a lot as I looked at this story this week. I found out that this leper, he was courageous. Because it took a lot of guts for this guy to approach Jesus at all. He breaks all the religious and societal laws of the day because he's heard that this guy, Jesus, heals people. He's heard stories about him coming to towns and casting out demons, performing miracles, people being healed. He thinks to himself, this is my one shot. He needs a healing. Do you approach God with courage like this in your life? When things are hard, do we come to God and ask for healing? I mean, are we totally honest with God? Think about the leper. It took courage for him just to be in Jesus' presence. Just to be in anyone's presence. And I think about my own life. I want to say that I'm courageously honest. That I bring everything to God. But if I really examine my heart, I see I don't approach God honestly very much. See, I'm too scared. Because what if I approach God and he doesn't answer me? What if he doesn't heal this situation I'm in? What if he doesn't heal my past? What if he doesn't heal my pain? How will I deal with that disappointment? And we all know, being a Cubs fan, that I've been disappointed in my life. But here's what I found the few times I've been totally honest with God. That I get to know him better. I mean, I really get to know him. I was reminded of that this week through some circumstances that left me feeling pretty uncomfortable. I went to a party and I felt out of place. I felt isolated. I just didn't feel like I fit in. And so I was feeling sorry for myself. But as I was driving home, God reminded me of this encounter that I'd had with him about 10 years ago. I was a youth minister and I was having a pity party. You ever have one of those where everybody's life is better than yours? Oh, woe is me. Everything is better for everyone else and my life is terrible, and what a pity for me, right? I'd been complaining about how some of the people that I worked with were so much better at what they did than I did. I was feeling rejected and alone. And during that time, for whatever reason, I took my pain straight to God, which is something I don't typically do. Typically, I want to ask my friends for help, or I want to look, or I want to just forget about it. So I turn on the TV, or I go to ESPN.com. But that day, for whatever reason, I didn't. I had the courage to approach God with my whole heart. I went for a walk one night with my wiffle ball bat. I brought it with me, all natural, as my trusted friend for a long time. And I went to the park, and I just started swinging my bat around. I hit some trees. I hit the air. My wife likes to tell me that I swung at mailboxes. I assure you, I didn't hit any mailboxes. But I laid out my pain and my disappointment and my discouragement the best I knew how that night. And God met me that night. He showed me a verse that I had read from Psalm 50. In verses 14 and 15, it says, "What I want instead is your true thanks to God. I want you to fulfill your vows to the Most High. Trust me in your times of trouble, and I will rescue you, and you will give me glory." And I was so comforted by that verse because God was telling me that night that he just wanted me to be thankful for who he had made me. He didn't want me to compare myself to anybody else. He didn't want me to think I needed to be someone else. He just wanted me to be thankful because he had made me a specific way. Just like he's made you a specific way. He's got a plan and a purpose for your life. So just be thankful for it is what he was telling me. And then when things got hard, when I needed to trust him, he said, "Trust me and I will rescue you." And I went home that night feeling more alive than any previous time in my life. Not because my situation had changed, because I still worked with the same people, but because God showed up. And for me, for at least that night, that was enough. I got to know him better in that moment. And really, I think that's the point of Christianity. The point of following Jesus is to know him. John 17:3 says this, "Now this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent." Eternal life is about knowing the real Jesus. I had the courage to get to know him that night. The leper had the courage to call out to him on the road. And there's something powerful about laying it all out there, about trusting beyond all hope that God will meet you in that moment. I'm sad to say I don't do that more often. But that's what I see from the leper in this story. God rescues him because he took a risk. He put it all out there. He showed courage even though he really has no idea what the outcome will be. When he says in verse 12, "Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean." See, he knows Jesus can heal him because he's heard the stories. But he doesn't know if he's willing. I wonder if that's how your relationship with Jesus is this morning. Do you know that he's willing? The leper has heard stories about him, but he's about to experience him face to face. Verse 13, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I'm willing," he said, "be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. I love that picture because he heals him. He says, "I'm willing," but beyond that, he does something else in the story that is so powerful. He actually touches the man. See, he didn't have to touch him to heal it. There's all these other accounts in the Bible of Jesus coming to people and healing them. He healed some people just by saying, "You're healed." By some people, he said, "Your faith has made you well." He didn't have to touch people, but in this case, he does. Why does he do that? I think it's because his desire is not just to heal this man's disease, but to heal his heart. See, there's an intimacy involved when you touch somebody. And for this leper, it would be even more powerful because he hadn't been touched in years. Jesus does this to show this man that he knows his deepest needs, just like he knows your deepest needs. He came to restore our hearts, and he wants us to know that he sees us in every situation, and he loves us intimately. That intimacy is available to us today because God is a God of compassion. If you look at the account in Mark chapter 1 of this same story, it said that moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. It reminds me of what God says on Mount Sinai to Moses in Exodus 34:6. And he passed in front of Moses proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness." He comes to our broken hearts, and he heals what really needs healing. I heard Tim Keller talk about this once, and he was talking about the idea of praying for peace in your life. And he said this, when a person asks God for something, God always gives the person what he would have asked for if that person knew everything God knew. When a person asks God for something, God always gives the person what he would have asked for if the person knew everything God knew. I take that to mean that God gives us the best thing for us so that we might walk with him and that we might know him more intimately. And in the leper's case, he doesn't just heal him, but he touches him. There's a scene I want to show from a movie called The Legend of Bagger Vance, and I think illustrates this really well. It's a movie, it's set in the 1920s. It's about a fictional character named Randolph Juna, played by Matt Damon, and he's the best amateur golfer of his day. World War I breaks out, and he signs up to go to the war, and he's put in charge. He's made a captain. So he's got a company of men under his command, and they go and they fight a bunch of battles. Well, one particular battle, everyone is killed except for him. He's the only survivor of this battle. And so he returns home traumatized, broken, destroyed. And so he tries to drown his pain and his sorrow with alcohol and isolation. And through a series of events, for whatever reason, he decides to play in an exhibition golf tournament with Bobby Jones and Walter Hagen, who were two of the best golfers of the day. As he's thinking, I should play in this, somebody shows up, this guy named Bagger Vance, who says, I'll caddy for you. This guy's played by Will Smith, and he turns out to be more than a caddy. Because Juna has a hard time figuring out how to play golf again. He hasn't done it in a while. He's forgotten how good he was. And so as he listens to Bagger, he regains his old form. He gets better, and so he starts the tournament, and he's not doing real well. But by the final day, he's only 3 strokes back because he's been listening to Bagger's advice. And so he's getting his confidence back, and he says, I can handle this. I don't need to listen anymore. And he slices a shot off into the woods, and while he's in the woods, he has a flashback to the war. And then we get this scene. Juna is ready to give up. He doesn't know how to bear all the pain that he feels. The Bagger tells him it's time to lay that burden down. He's got to make a choice. Will he give up, or will he face the pain and the hurt in his life? Now, that's a scary thing for him to do. He's like, it's too hard to remember. It's too painful. But Bagger, who's really a picture of Jesus in the movie, reminds him that he's not alone, that I've been here all the time. And that's what Jesus would say to us this morning, that whatever burden you're bearing, whatever cross you're carrying, whatever pain is weighing you down, that he's been there all the time, that he wants to heal you. He wants to help you carry this pain so that you'll be healed, but also so that you'll have a better relationship with him. Deuteronomy 31:8 says, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you, and he will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Now, if I could remember that God is always with me, I never would be discouraged or afraid. But life happens, and I get distracted, and things hurt me. And so I get discouraged. I get afraid, and I try and follow my own way of dealing with my pain, and it doesn't work very well. Instead, what we need to do is remember that Jesus says, never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. Remember that he's willing to walk with you through all of the painful trials of your life if you'll let him. Then, at the very end of this story of the leper, there's a really cool thing that Jesus shows us about himself. He not only heals us, but he trades places with us. Look at Luke 5:14 with me. Then Jesus ordered him, don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Now, at the beginning of the story, we learn about the leper and how he lived on the outside of the city. He was an outcast. He was all alone. He was in the lonely places. But Jesus heals him. He doesn't need to do that anymore. He can go to church again. He can be with other people. He's back connected to society. But Jesus, because of this healing, couldn't get any peace anymore. He walks around and people always want his attention. It reminded me of like the paparazzi with famous people, right? They can't get any peace. There's always people trying to get at them. These people want Jesus. I need a healing. I need you to touch me. I need you to be with me. I need this. I need that. And so Jesus, to get some peace and some rest and some time to connect with the Father, he often withdraws to lonely places. These lonely places are the very places the leper started. And I think it gives us a glimpse of Jesus' mission. See, he trades places with the leper by healing him, but in just a short time, he's going to trade places with all of humanity at the cross. Jesus comes into the world as a humble baby. He's sinless. He's righteous. He's holy. He lives a pure life. He shows us the way to live. We, on the other hand, have lived a broken life, filled with sin and shame and disappointment. And Jesus willingly, and there's that word again, willing, he's willing to trade places He's willing to heal the leper, and he's willing to die on the cross so that you and I can know the full measure of his love, so that we might be saved. Maybe you're here this morning and you recognize that your heart is broken. You see that you can't really fix your life. Jesus offers that life to you this morning. Said he came to bind up the brokenhearted. And Jesus shows us in this story that there's no limit to how far he will go to restore our broken hearts. Because if he's willing to trade places with the leper, the lowest of low in that society, then you should take confidence that he's willing to trade places with you, that he's willing to give you his life, that he did give you his life on the cross. All you need to do is receive it. It's by faith. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, "For it is by grace you've been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." It's a gift. It's by faith. You can't earn it. You just receive so that he can restore your broken heart. So what's your leprosy this morning? What's the burden that you're bearing that you can't lay down? The thing that's keeping you from being courageous? The lie that you're believing that has kept you from experiencing intimacy with this compassionate and gracious God, the one who is slow to anger and abounding in love, the God who trades places with you to rescue your heart. Lay it down this morning. Give it to him and find hope for your broken heart. Let's pray.